Hi, I'm Elaine Harding. Welcome to my blog at stampwithelaine.com. When you want to achieve a watercolour background effect, you used to have a acrylic block, an ink pad. You ink up the acrylic block, and then you needed a water spritzer. You spritzed it, and you need specialty paper, and this was how you did it to create your watercolour background. And then you'd have to wait for it to dry. I put too much water there and I've messed up, but that's how you achieved it. So as you can see, this can get a bit messy. In today's project, I wanted to show you a nice clean way of doing it, and this is simply by using a stamp set called Watercolor Shapes, and you can find it on page 102 in the annual catalogue for 2021 to 2022. This stamp set has rectangles, squares and ovals and circles, and they coordinate with the layering circle dies, the stitch rectangle dies, and also the double oval punch. The advantage of this stamp set is it's a distinctive stamp set, so they've incorporated into the stamp light and shade to give it depth, and this is the result. I've opted to use my Stamparatus with this stamp set. You can use acrylic blocks, of course, but I wanted to make sure that I was stamping straight. The card base is in Pool Party, cut at 4 1/8 by 11 3/4. On the long side you score at 5 7/8 and fold it in half. Metric measurement is 10.5 centimeters by 29 centimeters, and on the long side you score at 14.5 and fold it in half. There's a matte layer in So Saffron, which is 5 1/4 inches by 3 5/8, and in metric that will be slightly smaller, 13 centimeters by 9 centimeters. Matte layer 2 for the front of the card is in basic white, and that's 5 1/8 by 3 1/2. In metric that will be 12.5 centimeters by 8.5. The inside of the card, this is 5 1/2 by 3 3/4 inches. In metric that will be 13.5 by 9.5 centimeters. The sentiment stamp I'm using is the Biggest Wish stamp set, and some basic rhinestones to embellish it with. Bringing my Stamparatus, I've positioned my cardstock away from the edge because this is going to be fairly close to the top. Line it up with the top of the cardstock. I also want a scratch piece of paper because I need to stamp off. So pick up the stamp, realign the paper, ink up the stamp, stamp off by just placing the paper on top, insert it in the hinge perpendicularly and stamp. I can put my paper in the corner because I am moving the stamp. I'm repositioning my stamp like so to intersect with the previously stamped rectangle. You can stamp in any direction you want, there's no hard and fast rule, and overlapping it randomly gives it more interest. Now I'm going to change stamps, and I'm going to stamp a square this time. Pick up the stamp. I've removed the magnet because it's going to get in the way of my stamp. And you notice each time I've stamped off, As you can see, I've repositioned my square stamp. Pick it up, ink it up with Pool Party Stamp Off. I've changed stamps to the small circular one, carrying on with my Pool Party ink. Change position of the circle, and this time I'm also changing ink pads. So saffron. Again, stamping off. I've changed stamps to the smallest rectangle. Again, stamping in So Saffron. This time I'm swapping to the medium-sized rectangle. And changing position. Stamp my birthday, so I've positioned that onto my Stamparatus plate, and I'm just going to test it first and make sure that that is straight before I stamp on the card itself. Is that straight? Yep, that's straight. In case you're wondering what these transparent sheets are, I made this myself as a protective layer for my cardstock, so that before I stamp, I can stamp on top of the transparent sheet, check that the position is right before I stamp it for real on my cardstock. It saves you a lot of time in the end, and also saves your cardstock. You can quite easily make one for yourself. I cut mine at about 7 inches, I think, or 6.5 square, and then I rounded off the corners and put some washi tape on the top right hand corner so I know it goes into the corner each time. And that's the reason why I've preferred to use the Stamparatus to do today's card, because I want to stamp it several times to make the ink deeper. I set up my happy and did the same process. Just a tiny bit more stamping to do. I'm going to mount this on a block and just stamp it here. That's the card front finish. Now we'll do the inside of the card. So now we've done our stamping, we can assemble the card. First I'm going to glue this matte layer 1 onto the card front at an angle, and this one on top will be straight. So you're leaving an even border all around the 4 corners. And that's for the inside of the card, which is the bigger piece. Leaving an even border all around that as well. We just add a little rhinestone on here to finish it off. Before I go, I thought I'd show you some other samples. This is just using the single rectangle block as a background. This one came from the Timeless Tropicals cling stamp set and the tropical dies to die cut those palm leaves and the flowers, and that's the border dies. And this one is the Hydrangea Haven bundle with the hydrangea dies. So again, I've created a background with just the rectangles. So there's lots of different ways you can use it, and this is the way we made the card today. I hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial and are inspired. Have a go at making this card. You'll find the supplies below this video in the show more section. You can also find me on Facebook, Pinterest or Instagram. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll be back with more inspiration next time. Bye!